everybody. Welcome to Hardpoints, the podcast about energy, security, and the startup economy and how they intersect to shape the world around us. Each week, we unpack the real dynamics behind the headlines, what's changing, what it means, and why it matters to you. Thanks for being here. Neal, how's your week gone?
Good, man. I'm on the fundraising trail. It is a lot of work and not my favorite, but got to do it. How about you?
It's been actually a pretty good week. My kids are both off at camp this week. I have to go pick up my daughter this afternoon, for example. And then my wife was up at camp for a couple of days. They needed some volunteers at the scout camp. Now that scouts have girls in it, they needed female supervisors. So my wife did 3 days there. So I had kind of a bachelor weekend, which was filled with power washing. So, taking that power washer out for a spin,
Put it to good use, man.
Yeah, and like the lamest, most dad way of doing things, but like, yep, okay, power washing and baseball. That's kind of what I did with my weekend.
Man, did you find the Reddit channel that's like the satisfying? You can watch somebody else power wash.
I haven't become so one with a power washer that I'm going to Reddit to look for that. But I know you mentioned that last time, so I'll.
It's only a matter of time, man. It's only a matter of time.
Sucks you in. But then my wife also came back, so we it's just been like the two of us. That's kind of nice. Remind you a little bit of like who you were pre-kids is always enjoyable.
Yeah. That's awesome. Actually, that sailing trip I talked about last week was kind of like that for me and my wife. I think the kids were there, but one of the things we did early in our marriage was go sailing together. And we hadn't been for a long time because the kids were too young and you don't want a little toddler crawling around on a boat. It's just
no.
So the rule was, or the standard was, we're going to wait until our youngest can swim well, not just swim, but like swim in like ocean kind of waves. And he's there now. He's 8 years old. He's a good swimmer. It's all fine. But that means that like we basically spent a decade not doing this thing that we bonded over and love. So it was really good to get back to it.
That's awesome. Still super jealous of that trip. I know. Yeah. Awesome. Now one of the things as we've been kind of dealing with my mother-in-law's, declining health and ultimate passing is that we had to put off a couple of our summer trips this summer. But the flip of it is that we had to kind of put together a plan for a family reunion back east, kind of that was going to include my, now past mother-in-law. Well, we have that time off still. And so I'm trying to figure out like, how do I fill that time? Because like Lindsay can't work because the way she has to put in her schedules, it's like weeks in advance. So it's not like she could just be like, never mind, cancel my vacation. It's already booked. So we're thinking about like, okay, last year we were going to do like a multi-day backpacking trip up in the flat tops here in Colorado. So we're thinking about doing that. I don't know. We'll have to kind of figure that part out.
Cool. On vacation, here's an insight that I did not see coming, but a teammate shared this with me yesterday. So you may recall that I decided I got to pick. I'm CEO of the company now, so I got to pick, and I decided that the week of July 4th was going to be a holiday for the whole company. Right? It's sort of.
I remember you doing that. Yeah.
Yeah. So some feedback I got from a teammate yesterday was that it's the best vacation he's ever had. And the reason is because he knew that he wasn't missing out on stuff because the rest of the company was off too. Usually, and he explained, he's like, usually I go on PTO and everybody else is still working. So I feel like guilty that I'm not carrying my weight anymore. And also I'm feeling like I'm going to be so far behind when I come back that it's just stressful to be gone in the first place. But in this case, he was like super de-stressed because he knew everybody else was off too. And that he wasn't going to be missing anything. He wasn't letting anybody down. And he just like had the most relaxing time off. That's not why I did it, but it actually reinforces that I'm definitely going to do it again next year.
It reminds me of that meme, the goofy meme where I'll do it again. That's kind of exactly what you just did. You were the real life embodiment of the goofy meme.
I'm goofy anyway. That's fine. I'll take it.
Yeah, no, you're good, man. He was my favorite character in kind of the whole, Disney cartoon ecosystem when we were kids.
Yeah.
Well, how about we dive into some news here?
Let's do it.
All right, folks, here's your most recent news you need. We got 7 stories for you to kind of look through today. Starting here with ICE, now with Marine Corps level firepower, just a little less water based. According to some of the funding that came out of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that dropped, and it's a big, beautiful, and packing ICE with more cash act than the actual U.S. Marine Corps. That's right, ICE, the folks in tactical windbreakers detaining undocumented workers. They got $75 billion to expand deportations. That's more than how we fund the Marine Corps. They're $54 billion. So if you're keeping score, immigration raids are 1, amphibious assault units 0. ICE is now the most flush law enforcement agency in the country, which seems a little bit like overkill unless you're planning to build a wall on the moon and deport aliens in both senses of the word. According to the bill, they'll be expanding detention centers, hiring more agents, and presumably ordering enough zip ties to stretch across the Rio Grande. Our second story, also in the ICE ecosystem, is about ICE raiding a weed farm in California, and that protesters were blazing back. In a move straight out of a politically confused Netflix original, ICE also raided a licensed cannabis farm in California this week. Legal weed, mind you. Turns out the feds say undocumented labor and child workers were on site, which is obviously bad. But the response is ICE rolled in like it was a Black Hawk Down Humboldt edition. Protesters, hundreds of them, blocked roads, linked arms, and things escalated fast. A bunch of tear gas, bullets, and one guy allegedly fired a gun. 5 people ended up in the hospital. Meanwhile, the farm's owner, a former cop who supports Trump, is wondering how he became a target. The plot twist here is the story so messy, it's going to get optioned. The third story that we have here is venture capitalists are getting a hug from the big, beautiful bill. It did slip in some love for the VCs and startup bros. The biggest win is that the VCs can now deduct all of their R&D expenses right away instead of spreading them out like you're hiding a hangover from your accountant. Also, the tax break on qualified small business stock leveled up. Founders can now sell up to $15 million tax-free, up from the original 10. It's kind of like the government realized rich people just weren't quite feeling rich enough. And if you hang on to your startup shares for 5 years, you're effectively exempt from capital gains tax. So that's a nice little benefit for you and me, Neal. Also the carried interest loophole that has been, making a lot of fund managers pretty wealthy for years. Well, it's still there. Shout out to the private equity lobby's perfect batting record. Fourth story today is about the floods in Texas. Didn't just drown a lot of people. It's also drowning some of the insurance market. While Silicon Valley cashes in, Texas is underwater, quite literally. As discussed on the previous show, biblical floods smashed the hill country over July 4th. Rivers rose over 26 feet in under an hour. That's not really a river. It's more of like a horror movie. The death tolls climbed past 100, including that camp full of girls. Economic losses are projected to hit as much as $22 billion. That's just only the latest in a string of climate-related insurance disasters. Here's the kicker, though. Only about 4% of homeowners have flood insurance, so most of that damage is going to be straight out of pocket. Worse, insurance companies are noping themselves right on out of disaster zones across the U.S. faster than you dodged your landlord during COVID. Premiums in climate risk areas are up 82% higher in many places, and many are getting dropped completely. So basically, climate change is wrecking stuff in the insurance market. Is like, yeah, we don't cover that anymore. Fifth story, AI is now going to be running on the power of stars. Meanwhile, so Google is out here prepping for a sci-fi reality by signing the largest ever fusion energy deal, nuclear fusion. They locked in a 200 megawatt deal from Commonwealth Fusion Systems, a company that hasn't delivered electricity but promises it'll work sometime soon. Fusion's kind of been the holy grail of energy for decades. The idea is that you smash hydrogen atoms together, get clean, limitless power, same way that the sun's run, I should say, not funded. Nobody pays for the sun. The result of that is no CO2, no guilt, no blackout rage quitting. Google wants it to feed their AI data centers, which we've talked about, how they're starting to consume so much electricity and it's starting to have a climate footprint there. But these AI data centers are already sucking down power like frat bros at a 2-for-1 energy kegger. All right, so if it works, it's a game changer. If not, well, I wouldn't worry about Google. I'm sure they have a contract that means that they're not paying for anything until they can deliver. Our sixth story is that also kind of in the renewable clean energy area is that geothermal is having a hot nerd summer. So while fusion is stealing the headlines, geothermal energy is quietly going from meh to mega. Thanks to new tech engineers who are tapping into underground heat like it's a steam sail. The upgraded approach called enhanced geothermal systems means you can make hot rocks produce electricity almost anywhere, especially in the American West. One Princeton-led study says geothermal could supply up to 20% of U.S. power by 2050, maybe more if we stop screwing around. It's clean 24/7, and it doesn't care if the sun's out. Basically, it's the introvert of renewable energy, quiet, reliable, and always on time. And then our final story in the news you need is that Canada, Canada, you're going to pay more now. Trump just threw a tariff tantrum on Canada, jacking up import duties on maple syrup, wood, and a bunch of auto parts. Well, why? It depends on who you ask. It's officially to protect American industries. Unofficially, it's possibly to make poutine cost more just out of spite. The spicy bit, though, is that some sharp-eyed traders noticed a surge sell-off on the NASDAQ about 20 minutes before the actual announcement, which had no real reason for it to be happening. So think really big bets on U.S. stocks declining, like somebody knew what was going to be coming. Because nothing really says economic patriotism like making a buck before your allies even get the bad news. That's your Hardpoints news you need. ICE is fully armed, Google's chasing the sun, and Canada's in the penalty box. Insurance companies are bailing out harder than your Tinder date. Stay informed, stay upright, maybe check your flood coverage. A lot going on there, Neal. What do you think?
Oh, man. I'll start with the ICE budget. I think I read several things this week about how, the FBI is full of patriots who are well-trained, honorable people. I have some friends at the FBI, and because of that, they're harder to control. And so this is all a big play for the administration to have more control over an agency. So ICE is getting the best funding and more funding than any other agency, including the FBI and the Marine Corps. Holy crap. I'm trying not to be a conspiracy theorist, but this just reeks of, the increasing the power in another way of the executive, of the president. And it's a sign that our priorities are just all fucked up. They're just wrong.
Yeah, we talked about it last week about like how this big beautiful bill is really just a big ugly bill in so many ways. But this one in particular, it's the idea that we're going to spend more money on immigration enforcement personnel than we are going to spend on the Marine Corps. And the Marines, by the way, like this doesn't include money for building that dumb wall or whatever, but that's $75 billion. This is just for ICE itself. Like the Marines have to buy they don't do tanks anymore, but they have to buy amphibious vehicles. They have to buy helicopters. Those things are, the F-35s, which are, like 120 million a pop. Like you can spend a lot of money in a hurry if you're buying, fighter jets. What the hell is ICE going to spend all that money on?
I think the answer is on ensuring that they're solving a problem that at least I'm not convinced warrants that level of interest or spending. I mean, look, we've said it before. We should have a secure border. Biden fucked up the border. I'm willing to, I'm not partisan on any of that. I think at the same time, you're trying to solve a problem that isn't the worst problem we're facing. Is it a problem to solve? Sure. Should we solve it? Yes. Do we need to spend that much money on it? Definitely not. Does ICE need to be the biggest budget of any of the FBI, the Marine Corps, et cetera? Definitely not.
No. I was listening to some Scott Galloway, and he was kind of calling he was the same lines that you were. It's like, why would the president want so much money for this agency? And it's because they're the fewest controls. It is about centralizing power in the presidency. Scott Galloway was talking. He actually and he's a pretty moderate guy. He actually, runs a show called Raging Moderates. And he said it looks like the Gestapo to him. Why do you have a private military effectively that is responsible only to the president and apparently doesn't have this culture and history of this responsibility to the Constitution before all. And so I think that's a little bit what's going on there.
Yeah, the FBI, well, I say the FBI is full of honorable people. There's also been a long history of the FBI being independent from the executive, an unbiased law enforcement agency. And that is clearly not what the president wants. He wants control over a law enforcement agency, which is apparently what he's going to get, which, brings me back to, if this was honorable work, those motherfuckers would not be wearing masks.
Yeah, 100%. They wouldn't be wearing masks. They'd be publicly identifying themselves. They'd have the paperwork in order. Like they'd be exercising due process. They wouldn't be exporting people here with, legal status to, abusive detention facilities in third countries that are not connected in any way to the individual or to us. Like, what the fuck are we doing? So we got that going on. It seems to me to be putting into play a constitutional crisis. Like, and eventually this is just setting up a conflict again. And it's worth pointing out that even the FBI, with its history of independence, et cetera, like all institutions, human institutions, this is some of the genius of the founders, are prone to being abused. J. Edgar Hoover, did a lot of bad things. And we put in controls associated with that. Like, this is like giving ICE more power than the FBI had under Hoover, J. Edgar Hoover. And like, I don't know where this goes. So I think this is setting our country up for open on the streets kind of conflict.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of that's what happened at that marijuana farm. I, as much as I can't stand what ICE is, what they represent in terms of, not identifying themselves, lack of due process, being the biggest law enforcement agency, all the things we just said. I also don't think that what I saw anyway on that protest was way too far. Like, I'm all like, exercise your First Amendment rights, peacefully protest. What that looked like a mob that was ready to fight back violently against ICE. And it, to me, based on what I could see and what I heard from some of the people that were there, it was like, abolish ICE, which reeks to me of like defund the police, which I am not for. Abolish ICE is a mantra that says, immigration enforcement shouldn't exist. That's how I interpret that statement. And I don't agree with that statement. I think immigration enforcement can exist. It should exist. It shouldn't be done the way it's being done now, but it can exist. And all we're doing by shooting at ICE with real bullets and being violent in return is giving them the ammunition to escalate. And it's going to take us down a really ugly path. So ICE is bad. I just think we need to channel more Martin Luther King and, civil disobedience to the fullest extent, but not violence.
Yeah, I think I would agree with the general idea. I mean, like, there's actually research that shows about like how civil disobedience is a more effective tactic, right? Whether it's right or wrong, et cetera. Like, just from a pure tactical perspective, it is a more effective tactic. Not always, again, on the kind of like the social research sort of stuff, but pick your battles. This is a battle that ICE wanted, frankly. The idea of being able to fight over a California weed farm, that's like the most beautiful cultural fight that they could have. Illegal, employment for the farming of something that's still illegal federally. And, then they have it was just like, it was the wrong battlefield to be going on there. So we'll kind of see about that. So I would definitely agree with that, but I would also say that, like, I want to be very careful about like language policing. Where people talk about like the abolish ICE or something like that. I get it's kind of a shorthand that forces people to think one way or the other. But in a practical sense, like, ICE was created in kind of the post 9/11 ecosystem. Before that, we did have Customs and Border Patrol. There is a potential here where we could actually like get rid of ICE as the agency, because they seem to be a little too complicit with like a lot of not good things. And at a minimum, you're going to have to abolish like all of the ICE leadership, like get like clean house and kind of start over there. And so, I wonder if there's like not to get into the abolish ICE or anything like that, but I wonder if there's a governmental restructuring that could happen where we go back to either a Customs and Border Patrol's kind of a standalone agency, not necessarily underneath this, larger umbrella within DHS, or whether there's a rebranding of the agency associated with a massive clean out of leadership. Because right now they are, I mean, they're thugs, and they're defending thuggery. And anybody that's of any sense or moral standing, like, shouldn't be able to defend kind of like what they're doing. Even at the same time, having a belief that we should have, you know, border integrity and all the like.
Yeah, I don't disagree with the sentiment there. I think where I'm parsing is that what people that I know mean when they say abolish ICE is that they actually prefer like nobody to do border enforcement. They're actually on the side of like we shouldn't have immigration enforcement. That's what it's that sentiment that I'm saying I don't agree with the sentiment, and therefore I don't agree with that phrase. But what you're saying is right. I mean, like what ICE has become and what they're doing is awful and not, in my opinion, not American. I just think it's important to acknowledge what most, at least the people I know, what they mean is they want the lawlessness. They actually prefer the lawlessness, and I'm not for that.
Yeah, same. It's funny though, the people that like seem to be the most libertarian. One of the core libertarian ideas is that like that individual rights supersede even like national rights or state rights. And you don't see libertarians out there arguing for abolishing ICE. They seem to be the ones that are most the people with the don't tread on me flag are the ones most supportive of some of the thuggery.
Which is which is incongruous. It's like what we were talking about before with the Second Amendment advocates that now want you to have your retina scan to vote. You're like, what the fuck, man? What are you talking about?
Yeah, right. Individual liberties all the way down to except for when it comes to everything about your body.
Right. Only the most personal thing ever. Anyway.
Yeah. So the government's allowed to get completely in your body, but they're not allowed to tell you that you can't have an Uzi. So that's fine.
Perfect. Logically consistent, right? That's what.
Yeah. Well, who knows? Switching gears, man. Let's talk about the big ugly bill. And some of the stuff, specifically how it kind of affects like the startup ecosystem. I think that's actually pretty interesting. I think there's a chance that this is, maybe to his credit, this actually will drive some more money into the ecosystem. Hopefully not just exclusively into AI. But I don't know. What do you think about this, Neal?
Yeah, I mean, first, as an energy person, I've actually been interviewed a bunch over the last week with reporters just trying to understand the impacts. I think that has led me to having a bunch of conversations with just friends in the industry, people who are trying to sort through things. I think the consensus is, one, clearly bad for energy security. We're going to have to shoulder higher prices because we've kneecapped some of the fastest growing sources of energy. And so prices are going up. Consumer prices are going up. Utilities have already started petitioning their utility commissions to increase prices. That price increase is going to lead to companies, utilities getting more of their energy from overseas, which is, we spent all this time and effort to become energy independent, and we've been energy independent for about a decade. And now we're just going to throw that all back to the fish. So it's awful from that perspective. From a startup perspective, that means there's also a bunch of adjustment to be done. Like you've got to then now do the math on, I'm going to pay higher prices on tariffs and maybe an excise tax if I buy the lowest cost materials from a foreign, what they call a foreign entity of concern, basically China. Or I buy the higher priced non-tariffed US goods. But either way, I'm paying higher input costs, and now the tax credit goes away. So all of that's bad, but as I just said, prices are going up. So maybe it's not all bad, because if I don't get a 30% tax break, but I do get a 30% price bump, then maybe I'm okay. So, there's just a lot of people trying to figure that out right now, and they're in the weeds of it. I think, are there good parts of it? Yeah. I mean, yes, there are good parts. I think, there's, battery storage gets support for a decade. I think that's great. because it acknowledges just how important a role batteries will play. Um, but I think, people are going to lose healthcare. I mean, at the last, somewhere between 10 and 15 million, I think at last count, people in America are going to lose healthcare. I think, that's by design. And lots of people are going to lose food stamps. Most of the people who are on food stamps are young people, kids that are, we already have a hunger problem in America. This is just going to make it worse. So no, I mean, I think you started. Sorry, I'm on a rant. I'll stop, but
Go ahead,
I'll
man.
stop.
Okay. Yeah. So, I saw a video the other day of David Brooks kind of doing an estimation about like the consequences of cutting PEPFAR through USAID. And that like the number one consequence out of that is it's killing about 50,000 people a month
A month.
associated with it. A month. And so I think I have my numbers right. There's some real consequences to cutting taxes on the wealthy, and then cutting the way that we support, the most needy here and abroad. When you start looking at 50,000 bodies a month, like that stacks up in a hurry. Like how many people are dying in Africa right now because our priorities are all fucked up. And it was cheap. This was actually George W. Bush's, in my opinion, his singular, like his crowning achievement was PEPFAR. So yeah, that big ugly bill, and the flip of it is that I'm kind of interested here in thinking about like how this intersects with the startup economy, specifically about the R&D tax credits that they're working in there in the qualified small business. My first thought of that is that, as you were just talking about, like it's going to cost more to do all the things that you need to do because that's how tariffs work. But that money, it's not like that's money that you're paying for out of revenue, right? You guys don't make money yet. Like you're developing this thing in order to make revenue, but like you have to get it through this R&D phase. So the way that you get that money is by selling chunks of your company, right? And so if it's cost you more, and they're giving more tax credits to the venture capitalists in order to do this, like it effectively they're supercharging the amount of money VCs will be able to have in order to buy bigger chunks of your company. Because your valuations are not going to go up necessarily as much because your expenses are going to go up.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of where my head went on that.
Wealth concentration. Yeah, my initial thought. Sorry, I know I went off on a tangent, but my initial thought to your original question was, yeah, the rich are just going to get richer. There's already a massive wealth imbalance in this country, and this is just going to make it worse. We said last week, voodoo economics, trickle down economics, whatever, has been proven over and over again not to work. We're giving a big tax cut to the wealthiest so we can cut food stamps. That doesn't make any sense, and this is just is another aspect of that.
Yeah. So, bad news for energy independence, bad news for wealth inequality, bad news for American manufacturing in a lot of ways because of the cost of application. Like there's a lot of things going on there. And I mean, let's call a spade a spade. Like Heirloom is building, a world-changing potential product, right? Like this thing could absolutely, make a dent in the universe, to quote Steve Jobs. And it just made your life a little bit harder in some ways.
In many ways, a lot harder. Yeah, 100%. I think, like, we've been preparing for this, so we're like trying to be nimble and be, and pivot where we need to in the supply chain and all of that. But yeah, at base, it's the alchemy of like facing tariffs and potentially excise tax and dealing with a bunch of uncertainty and navigating a situation in which venture capitalists are going to be able to buy more and more of the company because I have to take that capital to survive. It's not my life is not getting easier.
Yeah, it seems to me it kind of ties to our last news item there about like the idea of how they were gaming the NASDAQ in order to take money out of it. Like this is about enriching only a few people, like pretty much only friends of those that are connected and those that are wealthy. 20 minutes is a long time in order to be able to be making trades, shorting the market, etc. Um, and it's also long enough to indicate that this wasn't an accident. Like it wasn't a little bit of a blip that was just prior, like a minute before the announcement. Like that was like, oh, maybe it was long enough that people were able to execute on it, and the trend was consistent and unambiguous that people were starting to short the market.
Yeah. Well, and to expand that out, there's been a bill on the floor of the House for a number of years. Actually, my congressman, at least one of the California congressman, Mike Levin, he's introduced a bill that would prevent senators or congressmen from trading private stocks for exactly this reason. And you need to look no further than that bill hasn't gone anywhere. He's presented it, I think, a couple of times. And, hats off to him. He's got the right issue in my mind. Like, I don't see there's no reason why congressmen need to trade private stocks. And given that they've got that inside information, like you just described, they are. I mean, investing is all about information. At a business school, that was one of the primary lessons. If you are going to be a successful investor, you have to have better information. Some of that you can get through analysis. Some of it you just get through your network, through your communications. So, but look no further. That Congress hasn't passed that bill. That's a good signal.
Yeah. I mean, there's that, but I also think
it's a good signal that sorry to interrupt, but it's a good signal that they don't want to pass it because they're making money.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, there's, and this is a both sides issue. There's somebody, I can't remember who it was, but that as their investing strategy is to exactly mirror Nancy Pelosi's public portfolio, and it's made them a boatload of money. So
yeah.
But in this particular case, I don't even think it was Congress that was probably doing these big market shorts. I think it was all the direct friends of.
I think
Trump.
I'm just expanding. I'm just saying it's not just the administration. It's definitely in this case looks pretty obvious.
Yeah,
pretty obvious.
So it's just kind of a weird thing going back to the kind of the startup thing. Sometimes is that as a startup we have to kind of realize that the ecosystem sometimes views us as the research and development arm of large corporations. That they have, rather than these companies spending a lot of money on R&D, they just let the peons like you and me go kill ourselves with stress, trying to raise money, selling huge chunks of our companies to VCs. Most of them flame out. A couple of them win big. The major corporation, the Google of the world or whomever, is able to buy us. Seems like a lot of money, but it's cheap at the cost compared to what they'd have to spend for R&D in so many other ways. And so it starts to realign that actually it's going to feel a little bit weird to say this because I'm a CEO, right? But I feel like I'm not necessarily a member of the advantaged class, even with a title like CEO to it, right? That the people that are really connected and really wealthy, they don't care. They're going to extract their wealth. They know how to do it, and fuck you for thinking that you can be part of our group. That's what it feels like to me sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, we signed up for it.
Yep.
Signed up for glutton for punishment for sure. But I can paint this picture. With one of my previous startups, I actually went to a big corporate for investment, and I actually said, "Look, this is when this technology works, you guys will be the best home for it, right? This is a perfect M&A opportunity." And their response to me was, "Look, there's no way I can write you a $5 million check. I'm just not set up for that. But once you're because we can't take risk, we're just totally averse to taking risk. And therefore, I can't write you a $5 million check now. But when you de-risk this whole thing, I'm more than happy to write you a $200 million check and we'll just buy it." And so to your point about they have so much money, they don't need the risk and toil and the innovation ecosystem. They just sit back and wait for us to do the innovation. Some of what we're working on is going to work. Some of it's not. But they've got a plenty big checkbook to write that, gigantic check later.
got to be nice to not have to solve your own problems and just to sit back and wait for somebody to keep presenting you with solutions and to have the check to make the problem go away. Um, yeah, no, I'm not trying to bemoan my position as a CEO. Like I'm an incredibly privileged, like my life is amazing in so many ways. Great family, great kids. I get to run the company that I run the way that I want to. We have great investors. So, to your point, we signed up for this. We knew what we were getting into. But, when I started thinking about like, am I on the inside? Nope. I'm on the outside making my hustle just as much as everybody else. So that's what we've got going on there. Sorry that they didn't close the carried interest loophole. But the rich got to get theirs. Moving on to finance, though, maybe a little bit more on kind of the insurance markets side of things. So talking about the floods in Texas, there projected to be somewhere in the $20 to $22 billion for insured losses. Like that's a massive, massive deal. And Texas is already separate from the flood thing. Here, they were already having flood problems associated with a lot of like tropical weather, hurricanes, etc. That were moving into the area. So Texas is already one of the more stressed insurance markets in the country. And so the cost of, or the insurance related claims for the insurance industry, I was looking at some of this research when we were prepping. They've gone up like 6 or 8 fold in the last 20 years in constant dollars. Like where insurance companies are like losing money, and these are supposed to be the companies that like are steady eddies you don't lose money with, and like they're not in the business to lose money. No business is. So I think we've talked about it a little bit before, but like the idea of like just not insuring certain areas because they're too high a risk. Um, I don't know, man. What are you thinking about this?
Uh, well, I'll start with insurance agents are like Vegas bookies. Um, if you almost never win in Vegas because those guys know more about how the bets are going to go than you do. Again, it goes back to information, right? Like, don't bet against the house because those dudes are looking at a much broader set of information, even on the games you can bet on. Certainly the odds are not in your favor on slot machines or any of that. Insurance agents are the same. They have a ton of data. They are not, you think insurance is like a risky industry. It's not. It is, they bet on very sure bets. They know when they write an insurance claim, they know they're going to make money on that claim. And so if you want to test any reality, just look at what the insurance dudes are doing. And if you therefore want to check whether or not climate change is real and climate change is causing floods and fires and other bad shit, just look at what the insurance industry is doing. And what they're doing is not writing policies in places where floods and fires and other bad shit is happening. So this is going to get worse, way worse. And look, just keep your eye on this space. The insurance industry is going to make money. They're going to make sure bets, and that's why they're not writing policies in certain places.
Yeah, I was talking to a guy named Nick Gardner. He works at a company called Premiums for the Planet, and it's about this business insurance pooling together under a specific insurance agents in order to start making certain requests of the insurance companies as far as their investment portfolios. But one of the things that Nick said, more on this topic, was that insurance has like governmental powers, but that moves at the speed of business. Which is to say, they can make a whole area effectively by making it completely uninsurable. They can also say, you're not going to get a mortgage here. And if you're not going to get a mortgage here, then your housing prices are going to collapse. Unless it's a place that's like just of such incredible beauty that you can have the super rich, and apparently we're making a lot more of them, but the super rich just pay cash for everything and like self-insure. We're like, my house gets lost. I don't really care because like I have millions anyways. So for kind of like the rest of us, like that's where insurance has like some real power, but it also makes you worry a little bit. Like, what do like the entire finance industry is based on insurance, like taking out some of the risk of the finance. Like that is like what understops it as being like a lower or mid risk, asset that people invest in. Um, that's setting us up for kind of a collision course of not having of every asset that everybody's like assets and balance sheets are all built off of, is having that potentially collapse as insurance pulls out. And so that's kind of like some scary stuff when you start thinking about it, because like for most Americans, the vast majority of their wealth is tied up in their home. And so if that home is no longer insurable, um, you know, that's like a term of your mortgage. Then the mortgage company comes calling and says, okay, time to pay it all out. You got that kind of cash? Probably not. So now you're talking about losing your home. And it reminds me a lot of when I was a kid, watching like the timber wars of the 90s and like watching all these like mill towns shut down, and how these towns essentially became all the people that lived in it. Like the first couple people that got out okay, but like everybody else like lost their entire net worth because their home was built in this town. The only reason this town existed was to run these mills. When the mills were gone, there was no employment, no reason to have the house there. You couldn't sell it because there was no buyers, et cetera. So that's where, not to be like too much of a doomsdayer here, but that's like where I start seeing things going there as far like the climate risk into insurance.
It could. I mean, I don't know if it happens everywhere. I think it is a canary in a coal mine. I think what we're seeing now is really smart people who are looking at the data, and as I say, they don't take risk. When they write a policy, they know how much that policy is going to earn them in dollars. I think to your point, like it is a sign that bad times are coming. I guess my caution on the doomsday part, I call it negative pants, whatever, is like, I don't think it's everywhere. I think it's going to cause things to shift, people to move, communities to change. It's going to lead to upheaval. I used to own property up in Northern California. That may end up being more like the climate in Southern California someday, right? So things are going to change.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I'm not trying to say that everywhere will go down, but like one of the things that across the world there are more displaced people now than there ever have been in history, and what that means is that they're all mostly internally displaced. They're staying within their country and they're moving from one place to the next.
Mm.
There's a lot of climate kind of in that footprint of like why people are. So this is similar, right? Which is now like this internal displacement problem in the United States is starting to come home.
Yeah.
Right. When if you can't insure your home in Florida or South Texas or in there's a lot of places actually in the Midwest that are starting to have like some of these problems as well.
Mm.
So where do they go? And historically, in like other countries, when that happens, is they move to the cities.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So the world's going through kind of a rapid phase of urbanization where people are moving off of rural areas, moving into cities. But if that happens in the United States, like that's also destabilizing to things to a certain extent, especially in our political system where we really advantage rural areas through the electoral college and through Senate representation. So what happens when like these places start losing population to cities? Like it just makes the country more fragile, and it's not exactly like we're feeling super robust right now. So that's kind of like a little bit my worry.
Yeah, makes sense.
So the last story that we can talk about here today is around energy. Obviously, so I'd love it if you'd tell kind of everybody about like some of the news releases that you've been doing and the interviews with the media outlets. Like that's exciting stuff, Neal.
Yeah, we were featured in TechCrunch. We did a groundbreaking a couple weeks ago for our pilot site, and that became a news story. Again, so much of this is timing. I think, yes, we were going to break ground at that time anyway, but it happened that it coincided with this big, beautiful bill passing and getting signed into law. And I think it was that sort of perfect storm where there were a lot of people thinking about how that bill changes the energy landscape. And here comes this little, seed stage startup who's saying, well, look, we're building low cost energy that can be deployed anywhere and is built on a super robust supply chain. So it's flexible. It's deployable rapidly and can maybe meet this moment where we're seeing massive increase in demand for energy and limited, options for how to get it. And so the news articles that we've been featured in really sort of combine this sort of moment where we're finally getting from design into building. We're building hardware now, which is super exciting. And I'm, both, excited about it. And, it's keeping me up at night because I want to make sure it goes right. And then this larger narrative around like, how are we going to get the power? Like if we're going to win the AI race, we need a lot more energy. IEA is saying we're going to double the amount of energy we need in just the next 5 years. But, the grid can't grow fast enough. And, my buddies that are trying to order gas turbines, they're all on back order. You can't get a gas turbine for 7 years. Nuclear's, yeah, they're right. I mean, some like Caterpillar, GE, everybody who builds gas turbines are all on back order for multiple years. Nuclear, great option, but you start a nuclear plant, you might get it 10 years from now. And then wind and solar, which was the fastest growing, has now been kneecapped by this one big beautiful bill. So, this is a perfect storm. And like I said, I don't think the data center folks really know where they're going to get their power from. I mean, Microsoft signed a very expensive power purchase agreement. Others are doing the same. I think there's just not great answers out there. And so again, like Heirloom just happens to be sort of in that spot. And, we've been working on this solution for a long time. This is just kind of like our moment, 15 minutes of fame, I guess.
Well, I don't know if sometimes this is, for me, this is one of those you make your own luck sort of scenarios. If you have the vision to know where you need to be playing, then when everybody else catches up to your vision, and usually that's forced upon them by, events, when they all catch up, then they go, oh, look at that. Turns out this guy's really well positioned. How lucky is he?
Yeah.
And, the reality is you're, a 5-year overnight success is kind of what happened there. Right. So,
Yeah.
Obviously you have to go deliver and you have to build the product that you have designed and that you're by no means, and this, and would say as much, you're not out of the woods by a long shot. Right. But all of a sudden people realize, yep, the vision of what you were talking about is there. And so, being able to generate wind energy affordably without having to do massive site, stuff, and being able to kind of deploy it, move it around, like that's a really big unlock. And so, kudos to you and the Heirloom team. I'm so stoked for you guys. But it's also worth pointing out that like you're part of the larger energy picture, and I know you would say the same thing. And wind power, even with all the awesomeness that is Heirloom, is still an intermittent power source, which is to say only when the wind's blowing do you generate wind to power. You can site it in places where really windy, so that helps. But so now you got to figure out, okay, either over-generate and store, this is the battery technology you were talking about earlier, or figure out complementary power systems for kind of the base load there. And so the two stories that we were kind of talking about there today was about fusion, about geothermal. The thing that's driving both of them is large data companies effectively needing reliable power. And so this is another one of those where business having kind of almost like government level authorities, but able to move at the speed of business, right? Which is they're able to like, historically, like you got your power from the grid. That was something that was a regulated utility, often government run, and, very tightly controlled. And now you've got like, Google buying potentially fusion reactors and Microsoft starting up, defunct nuclear reactors and people investing in geothermal. Like it's some really interesting stuff. It's kind of one of those things where right now where I think that the AI boom, even though in the short term it's causing emissions increases, I actually think it's in the long term is going to drive emissions decreases because it's turning all of these data companies into power companies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Let me start with broad reaction here is this is part of what I love about the energy industry. It's like infinitely complex. So I'll start by saying if you're Norway and you have heaps of hydropower, meaning like you've got dams, Norway gets 98% of its energy from hydropower. Great. If you're Norway, use hydro. If you're Arizona, you've got lots of sun, use a lot of solar. But every place is a little bit different. And to your point about having a mix, you've got to have a mix. Not every place is windy. Not every place is sunny. Geothermal has a lot of promise, but it's not everywhere. Fusion has a lot of promise, but I will tell you, there's a lot of skeptics out there. I'm not enough of a nuclear engineer to know. I rely on expertise from others, but I've got somebody who got a PhD in fusion energy from MIT, and he's like, it'll never work. Other guys,
I trust that guy's opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I do too. But also there are other people with equally good credentials that are like, this will definitely work. Right? I've got buddies working on fusion every day, and yes, my former employer just signed a big deal with, if fusion works, that really is or could be like it could work everywhere at low cost and solve all of our energy problems. Right? Not all of it, but right, it's that kind of tech. The problem is that it's really still probably a long way off. It's probably still like 10, 20, maybe more. Like some of the people, even the people that are closest to it say we're still really far off from getting fusion to work. Anyway, all of this comes back to you're absolutely right that, I spend a lot of time in the Middle East. What I got from that experience was that energy is our prosperity and our security. It sits at the center of everything. People are moving out of poverty every day because we've got energy in the world. And, most of that energy to date has been fossil fuel energy. The reason we have all the stuff around us today is because of fossil fuel energy. That's why you can't look at all the good that fossil fuels have done, just wag your finger at it. Got us to here. Can we do better in the future? 100%. Are we going to switch overnight? No, but there are these now because we recognize the externalities of burning fossil fuels and because we see that there are other technologies that can have more perpetual, lower costs, fewer externalities. That's why it's worth the investment. And it's worth the investment. I'll come right back to where I started in all of these different things: geothermal, nuclear, hydro, wind, solar storage, efficient gas plants. Right now, we need all of it. And the faster we move it along, the better it'll be for everyone. And I think, to come back to what you said about AI, those companies that are going to win the AI race are going to first win the energy race.
I love that proclamation. The ones that win the AI race are the ones that win the energy race. That's my quote of the day. What I would, when I think about like how one of my favorite factoids that talks about energy and about, to your point about illustrating about how energy poverty is real poverty, which is to say that like the average, like the Nigerian electric grid produces a certain amount of electricity. If you average that out per how many Nigerians there are pulling electricity off the grid, the average Nigerian off of the grid pulls something like 150 kilowatt hours. Your fridge in your home right now consumes about 10 times that much in a year, right? Like, and who am I? I'm in like no fucking position to tell a Nigerian they can't have a fridge, right? Like anybody, I can't tell anybody in the world that you can't have a fridge, right? So energy is essential to the human condition, and so we will not be able to raise people out of poverty. We've raised something like 1 billion people out of poverty in the last 30 years, mainly based upon access to energy. Energy is prosperity. Pure end of statement. The problem sometimes is that the people that petroleum-based products are one form of energy. They are clearly not our future, right? And so they just aren't. Like, we have to get, in the next 25 years, we have to find a way to get to zero. Like, and that's just the long and the short of it from a climate perspective. Like, that's the timeline we're all marching on. And so there has to be kind of this mindset of like this transition. And so, to your point, like a lot of these tech companies, they know that they have to win the energy race, but they also know that they have a climate constraint. both from the fact that like all the risks to ecosystems, business ecosystems, not just like the world's ecosystems, which have their own value, but tech companies don't care about. But like business ecosystems, like the insurance markets, all those things that are dependent upon it. But also just, direct regulatory pressure. They have that overseas. They have it, here in the United States in a couple of locations. So like they also know that they have to figure out a way to get this energy in the short term to fuel their growth. They're going to have to use fossil fuel based sources, but in the long term, they've got to move out of it, and they got to move out of it in a big way. So it's exciting stuff. I think sometimes about like, what's the pace of human ingenuity? And so when you grow things, like if I was to say like you were to double double your impact every like 5 years, we'll say, right? For most people, like that's a very quick rate of growth. Like that's an exciting thing in the startup ecosystem. You want to be faster than that, but like still, like that's pretty fast, right? If, on the scale of human systems, being able to double something, say every 5 years, is great. But if your goal is a certain distance, you're going to feel like you're losing until you're 5 years away from your goal, right? Till you're 5 years out, because like you're going to have that exponential growth associated with it. And so when you think about that, like these are the most important years for climate, whether we hit our 2050 goal or not, is happening right now, because we are setting up the terms of what is that exponential growth. Are we going to have a doubling of impact every 2 years, every 3 years, every 5 years? Compounding, like that matters in big ways. And so it feels like, yeah, I don't want to oil fed me, literally. Like when my dad used to work for the oil field. And so, that was the first 6 years of my life was, oil company contract or oil company paychecks feeding, my family. But we got to move out, man. We got to move fast, and we got to, not let energy be always compounded with petroleum.
Yeah, I'm skeptical that we're going to move fast. I think it all comes back to capitalism and people actually, I guess it starts with, if people aren't feeling the pain, they're not going to change out of the goodness of their heart. Capitalism is a strong driver, and they're going to follow what's in their personal interest and what's in their pocketbook interest in particular. So I think, bring it back to the previous conversation. There's a lot of people that just don't think it's real because they're not feeling the effects. I think the effects are coming closer to home. And as that happens, people are going to accept it more. I don't know. I'd also say that, the way that every energy company I've worked on so far, the starting point for me is it's got to be lower cost. It's got to be a better cost option. Bill Gates talks about the green premium, which is to say that if it's green, it costs a little bit more, and people are going to be willing to pay a little bit more for green. And I'm like, I just don't agree with that. I think people are going to buy the lowest cost option. And so for me, that's the other thing is it's table stakes is you got to be a better option. This is actually why I'm bullish about electric vehicles. It's not because they're green. It's because they're a better product. They last longer. They're quieter. People love the acceleration. If people love the product, they're going to buy it. And again, not because they're do-gooders or care about anything other than like, this is a cool vehicle and it goes fast.
Yeah, I would totally agree with all that, but also it's worth remembering that, the electricity you're generating at Heirloom will not be cheaper than the grid. When you scale,
not
it will.
Initially. Yeah, well, not
right. And so that's the thing,
Yeah.
right? Which is that like there is this, you have to get the little baby bird out of the nest.
Yeah.
So if you're always starting with like this will be more expensive than that, yeah, people pay a green premium early on in order to kind of move that because there's a few early adopters that are game with that, right? But you have to get the baby bird out of the nest.
Yeah. So in energy, this goes back to what I was saying before, but every market's a little different. It's just totally fascinating. In energy, you have the opportunity to pursue what's called first market fit. I actually didn't know this term until somewhat recently, but product market fit is what everybody's after. What we're doing is is following the concept of first market fit, which is go after the markets where energy prices are already high. And so I'm going to be more expensive when I'm producing at low volume. I, meaning Heirloom, is going to be more expensive at low volume, our first systems. And so go after markets like data centers, where Microsoft, again, just signed a contract for $180 a megawatt hour, which is at least triple of what a normal PPA would be, a power purchase agreement would be. But also, go to places where they're spending $450 a megawatt hour on a diesel generator, like a remote island, for example, or a mine. So my go-to-market is through those very expensive power markets. First, I get to sell systems, make money, learn about my system, mature the system. And as the cost of the system comes down, then I go to more competitive or lower cost markets over time.
Yeah. And that's amazing that that's available. That's not always available. You know, EVs, the genius of Elon Musk was that he sold performance machines to people that didn't care about the price.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And so, there is an irrationality to cars. Like if you wanted just a car that gets you from point A to point B, you spend so much money. But if you want a car that makes you look cool, goes like a fucking bat out of hell, then you're going to spend a different price point. Right.
Yeah.
And so he recognized that. I guess that's kind of a first market fit to a certain extent, right? But just it also like it makes me think of product adoption cycles. So I don't know.
I'm reminded of anyway. Yeah, keep going. But I'm reminded of a couple of stories there we'll cover next week.
Okay, cool. Well, I think we're at the time of the show where we do our goods, bads, and others. Neal, what do you got going good right now?
Yeah, so good. I am a Tillman Scholar, which is to say, I got a scholarship awarded by the Pat Tillman Foundation when I was in grad school. And I've been working on this project for the last 5-6 years. It's kind of a side project for me. But, there's a lot of similarities between veterans transitioning out of active service and athletes transitioning out of military service. So if you don't know the Pat Tillman story, he's a American football player, played at Arizona State and then the Arizona Cardinals in the NFL. And then he decided that he had to go join the Army. This was post 9/11, and he just felt like it was his duty to go do it. And then he was tragically killed in a blue on blue incident, and his family set up a foundation thereafter. So this foundation sits at the intersection of veterans and athletes. And I'm really excited that I'm going to be at the Pat Tillman Leadership Summit. It's the annual summit where we all get together and welcome in the new class. I'll be there next week. And we've convened a group of both NFL players and veterans to come together and start a project. What can we learn from each other? Because the way this story goes, you're a young person, you spend all of your waking hours being good at a thing, preparing to be good at a thing. And then you join a team and you go to battle together and you're at the center of the universe. People are writing newspaper articles about you and the lights are shining bright and you're making really important decisions and you're covering your brother's back and your brother's got your back. And then one day the lights go out and where are you? And what's interesting about what I just said is that could be either a veteran or an athlete. You don't know which one I was talking about. It's the same experience. It's why Tom Brady retired more than once. It's why when players leave their playing days, it's so hard. And it's also why when a veteran gets out of active service, it's so hard. So I'm really excited about that. It is, we've got a panel coming. I've got, a former NFL coach coming. I've got a couple of NFL players coming. I've got some veterans who are working in the space, and it's going to be a good time. My bad.
That's awesome, man. I'm stoked for that too. It sounds like it'll be a good time.
Yeah. I will report back.
Find out and report back.
Yeah. My bad is that I got a jury summons. I actually served on a jury duty last year, so I got a jury summons. First you call and you're like, don't call me. They called me in and then I sat there for the day. And then I actually got sat on a jury, 2 weeks of an attempted murder trial. I honored to do my duty. It's a civic duty. I did my part. And I thought, I must be good for like 5 years now that I've spent 2 weeks of my life just giving it to the county. But then I just got another one like 2 days ago. And I was like, looked up the rules and I'm like, are you serious? I got to go back a year later. It was a year ago. It was just over a year ago. So I'm not happy about that.
No, you would think like it reminds me when I was in the Navy Reserve that they had like these exclusion windows that if you'd been mobilized that you were excluded for like I think it was 5 times the length of what your mobilization was. So if you were gone for a year, you didn't have to worry about being mobbed for another 5 because like
That
you
seems
did your
fair.
turn, right? So yeah, you would think like, oh, okay, well, this person just gave 2 weeks of their life. Like most people never even give a day. Like you should probably be like, excluded for at least a while, but
Yeah.
who knows? I'm sure
All
there's
right.
somebody that's thought about it, but man, I wish they'd think about it a little bit more.
Yeah. Totally. There's 5 million people that live in this county. Like you can't find somebody else. Come on, man.
I mean, you're 1 in a million, so there's got to be at least 4 others, Neal. So,
yeah. I mean, anyway, I digress. My other this week is the Grok AI. If you haven't seen this story, this is wild.
oh, what
So
a fucking train.
Grok AI is the sort of Elon Musk owned, affiliated with Twitter, X, whatever, and it went full Hitler over the last week. And
And you're not saying like you're not like using hyperbole. It actually was like praising Hitler.
Yes, no, I am not exaggerating. This is literally what it did. Look, I'm a technologist. I understand that things don't always go right the first time. I'm sympathetic, let's say, that things evolve over time. But this is why it's my other. I think we got to watch this space. Holy shit. Like if they don't fix it and if the whole of the industry doesn't figure out what went wrong here and not let it happen again, we got bigger problems.
Yeah, I don't know if that's totally fair. This seems to be a very Musk related sort of thing. I don't think I've heard of OpenAI or any of the other AI companies having real problems with praising Hitler. He has a tendency to
Maybe I
allow
shouldn't be
bad
so
things to happen.
understanding. Maybe I shouldn't be so understanding. It's sort of a man in the arena kind of thing too. Like I don't want to second armchair quarterback it. And I've been involved with software projects enough at Google. Like we launched some stuff that was just broken, and you'd expect from Google that stuff wouldn't happen. But look, I mean, it's the mindset is like, let it go. We'll fix it fast. And so I also, maybe there's some bias in there from me.
Yeah. And to take Elon Musk's side, for once, in my case here is that, he does have a bias towards wanting to have more conversational, more free speech kind of focused systems. Associated with free speech is the idea that people are going to be talking about like some pretty awful stuff, white supremacy, et cetera, including white supremacists who are going to be speaking not in an academic way of like how we shouldn't be doing this. They're going to be actively supporting it. That's happening on his platform. And so, he's running into kind of that fuzzy, blurry edge between what's responsible control versus free speech. And if you're a free speech absolutist, like that means that you're going to have assholes training your AI on how to be a white supremacist. He's either got to get real comfortable with that, like which is he's got the white supremacy AI, or he needs to figure out that there's a border here that we have to control for. And so
I think
he's decided that like probably. He's done other things. Assuming that the board at Tesla or SpaceX isn't like yelling at him to spend more time there too. For me, my good is that I just had a really nice date with my wife last night. When we first moved to Denver, the realtor that was showing us around like recommended this one place because we moved here from Italy, and so she was talking about this place called Shells and Sauce here in Denver. It's and she said she thought it was like the best Italian restaurant we ended up going there. It's not really like Italian; it's more like an Italian American, which is to say, very good. But it's not like if you're looking for a like an authentic Italian, like what you get in Naples, Italy. It wasn't quite that, but it was good food, great service, reasonably priced, cool neighborhood. I love the Congress Park area. But more importantly, it was just a great night to spend with my wife. I enjoyed that. So a little benefit of the kids being out of town right now.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
For me, the bad is kind of one of these, like, I think it's just like these absurd announcements. Like the idea of like, we're going to spend, buy 200, block a block. It doesn't even matter like what number they throw in. Like, we're going to buy fusion power. Um, Best case scenario, if like the people at Google are like over the moon excited about this is like 10 years away. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So like, why are you putting out a press release now for like a contract that like you're almost certainly not going to be able to deliver on because of like all the complexities of it, and it's a decade away.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it seems to like just suck. Like, I think it actually caught like the bad of this is that it causes people to distrust announcements, right?
Yeah.
Because like, I mean, thankfully, your story didn't get buried, right? Because
Mm,
you didn't have a massive contract with Google that you got to announce about like, saving the planet or,
mm,
harnessing the power of the sun or something fucking absurd.
mm-hmm.
Yours is just like, is real hard work that is getting obscured to a certain extent. And thankfully, it didn't get obscured enough that people didn't notice it, but there was a good chance of it. So I'm just kind of over it. Like I'm over like the big, proclamation bullshit, like we work style. We're going to change like the fundamentals of, we're going to disrupt the real estate industry. Like I'm just fucking over it. So, um, I'm glad that Google signed contracts, to help kind of give indications for fusion power. I think if it pays off, that is the future we need. 100%, but just fucking stuff your press release. I'm tired of it.
Check.
Um, and then the kind of the other here is that my co-founder William has long said that Acclimate to a certain extent is almost like an extension of my personality, which is to say is like when people talk to me, like they see like they get some trust in the carbon accounting associated with it. They want to get with it. Like he thinks I'm a good educator. I help to educate people about like how carbon and climate and all that works together. And so Williams long said that like what we really need to do is get your brain out onto the internet. And to a certain point,
Mm,
that's kind of why I do the Hardpoints pod. Is just to like
mm,
share my opinion. I don't know if it.
mm,
William obviously believes in me. That's why we're co-founders together. I don't know if anybody else is listening, but that's part of it. But the other part of it is about the education component, and it became really clear to me that we needed to educate not only our customers but potential customers, anybody that's just kind of out on the web looking for learning about like what is carbon accounting, how do climate regulations work, what's the relationship of all of this. And so over the last couple of weeks, I've been putting together an online course on that. We're calling it The Language of Climate. And it's available to everybody for free. So people can kind of come in and look and learn about it.
cool.
And if you get through the course, it's meant to be about like a couple of hours. There's a couple of quizzes along the way. You pass the final test, and then you get a certificate and you can share that. So it's a little experiment to see um, you know, whether we can help to kind of get the brand of Acclimate out there a little bit. And then
Mm-hmm.
just, in the more generic sense of like, how do we get my brain onto the internet? Because like I'm not that special, but I do have specialized knowledge. Like there's not like you don't need any particular degree of brilliance for this. You just need somebody to explain it. And so and the people that explain it right now are like they tend to be experts that operate in kind of academic settings, and that's just not how the world is going to work. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what we're trying. We're putting this this
Cool.
this course out there.
That's awesome, man. I mean, it sounds accessible. That's the word that comes to mind. And that's critical because I think a lot of people can't. It's hard to connect the dots. And so if you're going to help people really understand and connect the dots, that's amazing.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Well, I think that's all the time we got today. Neal, you want to read us out?
For sure. That's it for this episode of Hard Points. Thanks for listening and being part of the conversation around energy, national security, and the startup world. If you found today's episode useful or thought-provoking, make sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're feeling generous, share it on social media or send it to someone who'd appreciate it. Thanks for joining us. Hardpoints is produced by Jordan Caruso and brought to you by the Valor Media Network. See you next week.